Hi, everyone. We are so excited to have our very first interview on the Loop and Pro podcast with our dear friend, Kelly Cortan, who runs the Royal Bee Yarn Company in Pacifica, California, which is 10 minutes from our house.
Yeah, maybe not even.
Probably not even.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful new yarn shop in Pacifica, and we are so lucky to have Kelly here. Hi, Kelly.
Hi. Thank you for making me your first interview.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for saying yes, even though you didn't know you were our first interview.
Yeah.
I'm down.
Yeah, let's just jump right into it. So we interviewed with Kelly on her own podcast thing early on in quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, we were talking to her and her husband, who was just starting to maybe think about getting into crochet. So my first question is, how is Tony's crochet going?
It's not really going. I mean, he was so I've been trying to get him to knit for forever, and then when he was so inspired by Lewis Loops, by Crochet 101. He was like, I've got this. I'm totally going to get into it. And then the board game that you made, he was just completely into it. And I really thought, this is it. He's going to get into it because of the whole aragurumi, and he started, and then it just went.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's something that I've been trying to figure out, because I find that that's often the case, and I think that the best way to get around it is to have more of a crash course for amigurumi specifically, like a video where it's here is, if you have never crocheted before, here is just a whole crash course straight into crocheting a ball character. Because I think that a lot of people get started with the 101 series and then they go this is too much, or I don't know, they just get over it too quickly. I think I need to get them interested in it a little quicker.
Maybe some more beginner patterns.
Yeah.
Did he complete the hat project? No.
Yeah.
Didn't complete. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we tried.
I mean, he's very artistic, and he's doing a lot of painting and so forth. And what needs to happen is we all post-quarantine need to go out to dinner, and he needs to just kind of get his mojo with it back. Yeah. But I've tried so many different times to get him into it, and he just loses concentration. So yeah.
That's another
It's gonna happen. He's just starting to get into yarn, though. I mean, he's actually we were doing a couple of our little tiny little video podcasts, and he was like, oh, I really like this color. And I was like, do you want me to make you? He was into it. So I was like, okay, there's hope for him still.
Yeah.
I think that's a win.
Yeah.
Just to have it.
Just getting interested
and
in
to be a co-host on your blog video series, that's a huge step. This is the closest Louie's been to knitting. So this is a win.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's an interesting, just getting people, I bet you have to think about getting people interested in knitting and crochet pretty often, huh? I'm kind of going away from our set questions here because it just feels natural to ask, what's your system? How, if someone comes straight into the store and they're like, I want to get interested in knitting, what do you do?
Well, I have a whole beginner class that I do for people, and of course pre-COVID we would do that in person, so I'd encourage them to sign up for either beginning crochet or beginning knitting, and then I have kits that I've put together with practice yarn and then some so yarn, and I have a whole system. And actually post-COVID, I now also have kits. People come in and they're like, oh, I really am interested in crocheting, or I'm interested in knitting. And then I send them a series of videos. And for crochet, what I tell them is to Google Crochet 101 and go straight and sign up to yours, because it's the best. And I'm not just being sweet because we're friends. It is. And then Kelly of Kelly White Designs was kind enough to video her hands and do a little voiceover with the technique that I teach in terms of the beginning knitting class. So I can now tell them, oh, go to our little channel and you'll see steps 1 to 10 because I have a particular approach that I like to use in terms of teaching people how to knit. And although I have taught people how to crochet, it's a total cheat because I can barely crochet. So it's only because it's so fresh and new that I was able to kind of impart the info.
Yeah, we talk about it, like me and you talk about it all the time, about how like it's very interesting how many knitters don't crochet. and like, even though they're using almost the same tools, so close, and you're making very similar things often.
And it's funny how many crocheters have no idea how to knit.
Yeah.
That they don't even know how to cast on.
Yeah.
Where you might be lucky to find a knitter who knows how to chain because they need to for a very specific technique.
Right.
Like a provisional cast on or chain the edge of a blanket.
Yeah.
But I don't know many crocheters who are primarily crocheters
and
that even know anything about
it.
And
I think the layman would thinks of them so like they're synonymous in everybody else's brain. Like crocheting and knitting are the exact same thing. And it's like, well, they're not. Like not even close. And not only are they not, but like the communities aren't even the same. Like we don't, it doesn't commingle as much as people I think would assume that it does.
Right. But that's why we're here.
That's why we're here. That's exactly why we're here.
It is why we're here. And it does commingle in my shop. I probably have about 50-50.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's one of the reasons why I love your shop, is because like when we were talking once upon a time, like years ago now, about the idea of opening a yarn store, our main thing was, okay, but we don't want it to just be about knitting. We don't want like it just to be a shop that's for knitting, because as a crocheter, I feel like a minority in the community of yarn, where it's like, why don't you guys pay attention to us at all? But yeah, but you definitely do.
No, you're really wonderful at being approachable to both sides of this canyon that is yarn.
Yeah.
It's all about yarn. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm obsessed with fiber. And so anything that you can do with fiber, whether it be knitting, crochet, macrame, weaving, spinning, it's all the things.
All the things.
All the things.
So since you got so into yarn and you decided to open up a yarn store and you turned your love of yarn into a company, into a job, what do you do now for a hobby? What took over hobbies?
No hobbies. I'm 3 years in. I'm like, there's no time. Honestly, like I barely get the opportunity to knit, although I guess crochet, because I learned how to crochet since I opened up the shop, so that was fresh. And it's interesting when you turn something that you're passionate about into your life's work, as it were. And so and it sounds totally cliche, but I'm going to say it anyway. Like, every day I wake up and I'm like, there's major nerves in terms of having your own business. And obviously I'm a one-woman show in the middle of COVID, which is also super stressful. But outside of that, it's like I feel like I'm living like my best yarn life. And, I have 2 yarn lines and a shop. I pinch myself every day.
That goes really well into a question I want to ask you. What's your favorite part of the shop? Whether it's a specific location in your shop or something that you've done differently in your store that you're really, really proud of.
I don't know if I've done anything differently.
I would disagree with you.
I would too.
I think your whole shop, like, there's a reason why we're talking to you. Like your shop is very inviting, very welcome. The fact that it's so open is a huge deal, I think, to
Not
us.
To mention the theme that you have in your shop, the Royal Bee, the bee theme. And behind you, we see these beautiful honeycomb holders on the walls, which are just wonderful.
So it's 2 things. The first is that, when I was working my corporate VP job and earning enough money that allowed me to be able to open up a yarn shop, I had no life and no community. And so, part of opening up, I wanted, it's the Royal Bee Yarn Company because I always knew that I wanted to launch my own yarn line. That was the main thing. And having the shop for me is about community. And so, my favorite part is, our seating area where people come and hang out and knit and crochet and embroider or just macrame or whatever it is that they want to do with fiber, table looms, whatever. And spin. We even have some portable spinners that hang out at the shop. And I always have like tea and coffee and water and snacks. And we have made it super plain that from the very onset of opening the shop that we are fierce supporters of our BIPOC and LGBTQIA community, and that it's a safe space where you can come and hang and enjoy your craft with other people that are like-minded crafters. Yeah. So that's the part that I love the most. But when I come in the morning and nobody's here and I'm mopping the floors and cleaning everything and I'm by myself surrounded by the yarn and it's really quiet and I make myself a cup of coffee to start the day, that's kind of my favorite.
Oh, sounds magical.
It does.
Like,
the way you talk about your yarn store really resonates with me because obviously, like, we're two peas in a pod here. Like, I've started my own yarn company in its own right. I'm not built making my own yarn yet. Who knows? But I totally agree. Like, my day job is fine. It keeps me fed and alive, but the community that has been created by starting this business and starting these, I do live streams every week, and I really think that it's completely changed my outlook on everything. Like, it's just, we've built like this amazing community of people that I truly love. I love talking to them every week, and my Sundays have become like my favorite part of the week now because of the exact same thing. It's the community that I didn't anticipate at all. That wasn't, that I knew that would be like a bit of a small part of starting a business, but I didn't think it was going to be such an important part to me, like 3 years down the line. But yeah, I totally feel you there.
I had major nerves, I have to be honest. Like, I went into this with the shop with the intention of providing a fun space for people to come and hang out. And in fairness, I've provided this space and the community has really done the rest. So I can't really take credit for that.
Oh, totally.
But
Same.
I was nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, what if there's like a bunch of people I don't like? Or what if what if people are rude or hateful or, and we've had a couple. Yeah.
It's impossible not like, they find their way in eventually. and navigating how to approach that is like a whole nother thing that I don't know about you, but I was never expecting, like, how am I going to navigate talking to people that I don't want to talk to?
Last time I was in your shop, I noticed you had these very delicately framed guidelines on what is welcome in the shop and what is not so welcome in the shop. And can you elaborate a little bit on what those little reminders are for new customers coming in?
Oh yeah.
So I do. I have little framed inclusivity signs and also like a little framed rules of kind of like engagement, which pretty much just say that we support the communities that I mentioned and we don't support any hate, and that you'll be kindly asked to leave if if you misbehave. And one of the things that we have that's kind of unusual, because actually this was a problem that we ran into, was sexual innuendo. We just asked people to kind of refrain from sexual innuendo because what is funny to somebody might be actually really a trigger for somebody else. So that's one thing that's kind of special to the shop, I guess. I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
but we're so lucky. We're in this beautiful little bubble, which is the Bay Area, and we mostly are like-minded, and so it's not, it's easy for me to do the right thing. If I lived someplace else, it might be much more complicated, but it's really not been an issue.
That's very interesting. So you opened the yarn store prior to quarantine, and community obviously became a huge part of it. How did you have to adapt since having to close down and stuff like that? What kind of steps did you have to make to change the business model a bit
during quarantine?
Yeah.
A pretty substantial pivot. I was a year and a bit into launching my own yarn line. So obviously, not having the shows has been a major bummer. Not having the shop full of people hanging out, and something really as simple as, oh, I need to nip to the restroom. Would you mind watching the shop? Because like I said, I'm pretty much it. Although I had a volunteer in, I call her Shop Angel Judy, and she was amazing and just magical at helping people fix their mistakes and reading complicated patterns. And I can't wait till she can come back, but she's older and has some health risks, so it's just not an option. I wouldn't put anybody at risk working in the shop. It's just me. And then of course, for those of you that don't know me, I'm a self-confessed germaphobe. So I was kind of already on the OCD side of things, not to the point where it's super, super extreme, but like hand washing. My husband has a tattoo of me with Lysol wipes. So that tells you, and this is way before quarantine. So,
You were prepared.
Yeah. It's one of the things I love about wool is that it's naturally antibacterial and antimicrobial. So
really, I had no idea.
Yes. That's part of the reason why it's okay for me to have people touching my yarn, because otherwise I'd be kind of so yeah, no, it is. Yeah.
Wow. I had no idea. That is really interesting. Huh. They look at you like, oh, I knew.
So we obviously have social distancing. I have stickers on the floor. I have hand sanitizers everywhere. I've used isopropyl alcohol because we were closed from from March 16th until I think June 1st, and we were one of the first retail environments that were allowed to reopen. So it's masks, all the CDC protocols, and nobody can hang out, which is a bummer. So we've done Zoom. We've been doing Zoom stitch groups, and then I have these little I've started these little monthly just everybody hanging out. We had the band that I'm in, the lead singer play. I'm going to ask Jules to perform.
I tuned into that Zoom specifically. It was so wonderful to see all these crafters in the Zoom windows, if they wanted their video on, just crafting away while Brazilian Air was doing her thing. It was so cool.
Yeah, we had a comedian, and now we're going to have a storyteller coming up.
Oh, what? Oh, I gotta join the story with telling one.
That is so awesome. Cool. That is so cool. So yeah, so let's talk about your musician life, because that's a whole nother aspect of you. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised you didn't say that when it came to hobbies, because when I think about you, I definitely think of you as also a musician. So tell us about your band, and tell us about your music life.
Well, I feel like the least qualified musician. I can't really. I feel like like I'm a fraud.
Oh, it's this imposter syndrome, though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I have that.
Oh yeah, literally.
So hard.
There's very few things that I don't have that in.
But my husband was a bona fide rock star in the UK. I lived in the UK for 20 years, and my husband was signed in the early 90s, and he played with Like their band played with Bush and No Doubt, and
Whoa.
You didn't know this? I know you way better than he does.
That's awesome.
I saw the picture with Gwen Stefani and Tony.
yeah, I took that picture. That was when they were touring. They were the opening band for No Doubt in the UK. They traveled all over the UK, and it was when the Don't Speak or whatever, I should know what it was called, but that song in the 90s went to number 1 in the UK. So we went to the gas station and bought Gwen some flowers, and that was the picture of us giving her the flowers to say, congratulations, you got to number 1 in the charts. But Tony has like gold records in Germany and all that shebang. So he's a real musician. And then Aaron, who's the kind of, head of our, and their band at the time, it was that 90s grungy punk, and then when we moved to the United States, which was in 2008, of course, Tony needed to be in a band. He has to be in a band all the time.
Yeah,
He just,
it's
it's part of his blood.
Yeah.
We met Aaron, and he joined Aaron's band, and then we were at Aaron's house, and her family are musicians. I was just an audience member, and everybody was trying to play like all these unique instruments, including the musical saw. And they were passing it around, and they said, "Oh, you give it a try, Kelly," and I was able to make a noise out of it. And so, long story short, I've already made it long. I play the musical saw. So Aaron was like, "Oh," and we were playing quite a lot in San Francisco, a lot of the places that Jules also plays, Cafe du Nord and Amnesia and The Lost Church, which is our absolute favorite of all time.
I miss it.
I love them. I love The Lost Church. And she was like, "You have to learn how to play the saw. Nobody else has a saw player. You've got to figure it out."
Oh yeah.
And
totally.
so
Unique.
yeah. So she taught me how to play the saw, and now I also play the glockenspiel and a bunch of different percussion instruments and a little melodica. It kind of like, I'm totally into like doing everything badly.
No, I mean, that is so cool. When I was in when I started college, I got really into awkward instruments. I guess that kind of is the way to say it. I mean, prior to that, I was really into ukulele, and I still am really into ukulele. But around then is when I started playing accordion, and I always thought like, "Oh man, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to keep doing it." And then I totally lost interest. Like after a while, I was like, "This thing is heavy all the time."
We have I'm forgetting what it's called. Washboard. We have a washboard.
Oh yeah, because I used to
wall.
play washboard too, and
A little mini banjo.
And I'm trying to find the correct term for this. The metal jaw harp. Yeah, because I used to play that a lot as well. And go to like banjo fiddle festivals and play the jaw harp. Anyhow,
I want to ask more questions.
yeah, you go for it.
So, because you have your interest in music and of course your interest in the fiber world, I should say your passions in both of these things, who in those worlds, in those artistic fields, inspires you most?
Yeah.
Are there certain artists or designers or yarn dyers that you really admire, that you look up to?
Oh, I have so many in the fiber world. Oh gosh, where to start? I mean, like, I love Malabrigo, which is, a pretty mainstream yarn now, but they started in 2005, and two brother-in-laws, dyeing some yarn in a kettle. And now they're, in Uruguay, and now they have like headquarters there in Peru. And what I love about them, and I carry a lot of their yarn in my shop, is because they, firstly, well, I should say that, little plug for my shop, I make sure that every single yarn that I carry in my shop, the source fiber has been sourced ethically that the animals are treated incredibly well, and that the dye processes are ethical, even with the superwash. So I pretty much specialize in natural fibers. I haven't got a lot of synthetics at all, because they tend to be quite toxic for the environment. So I try to carry natural fibers that are, and even with the superwash, which is a compromise, that it's being managed responsibly. Malabrigo do manage it really responsibly, but also they employ women who typically wouldn't be employable. I don't know if a lot of people know that, and I love that. I love it when people marry something positive, either for the earth or for other people. Lady Di, Diane from Lady Di, she's amazing. She does all of these. I feel like I can still learn so much from her, because she's doing a lot of these amazing kits, which have just taken off. And her dyes are really like bright and fun and vibrant, kind of quite different from my personal aesthetic and my yarn, because I do natural dyes, and my stuff is quite muted and restrained, which is hilarious, bearing in mind I'm covered in tattoos and have like, and yet what I'm drawn to are these like natural, like really kind of muted colors. So it's kind of funny. But anyway, she's the opposite, but she's like craftivism. She's all about like empowering everybody, and she's like kind of the true definition of inclusivity. So I really look up to her. From a personal perspective, Denise Bayron, the Wave of Change jacket, I'm obsessed with it. This is my third, and I'm on my fourth. I think it's a great pattern that everybody can, it's a perfect like first cardigan pattern too. I love your aesthetic.
How dare you! I was not expecting
just a little something I made earlier. So this is beautiful. Let's see. Afifa from Afifa Knits. She's wonderful and really creative and kind. We have this like fiber community in the Bay Area. Leanne, who's kind of connected a lot of us. She works at Firebird and is kind of like the connector of, or was the connector of a ton of people, either fiber designers or yarn dyers or artists, fiber artists in one way, shape, or form. So, yeah.
I want to go back to how you were talking about your muted colors of your lines, and you mentioned that they are all naturally dyed. And I wanted to ask you about your not one but two yarn lines. Are there more coming? I want to hear just you talk about your lines, how they're created, how you pick your colors, and what inspires you to go one way versus another during that process. Because I don't know a lot about dyeing or creating your own yarn yourself. I just go in the store, I grab, ooh la la, so pretty, I buy, I go knit. But everything before the store, I don't know very much about, and I don't know if our watchers, listeners know much either.
It's definitely something I'm very interested in too. So
okay. I wanted to create what I felt was the yarn that I wanted, like my version of the perfect yarn. So I love soft, but I hate pilling, and I always want good stitch definition, because I don't do a lot. I'm a very lazy knitter. I don't do a lot of color work. I like things that are quite plain, as we already discussed, which is hilarious. And I was kind of dissatisfied with a lot of the yarns that I had used, and also I really am a granola crunching, totally all about the environment kind of a person. And so I also wanted something that was going to be good for the environment. And there's a whole history to how the wool industry, the demise of the wool industry in the United States, and also issues locally in California with a lot of fires. And we've kind of like we used to be a really large wool producer. We're still a large wool producer proportionately, but it is significantly lesser. And these grazing animals are really, really good for the environment. So I wanted to have kind of like all the stitch definition with all the softness and try to create a yarn entirely out of California, because I had been really inspired by the fiber shed movement. That could be a whole nother tangent. I'm a fiber shed producer. What ended up happening was that I couldn't source merino that was fine enough. I have an 18 micron merino, which is really soft. I couldn't source the fiber in California because they just don't grow here. So the closest I got was South Carolina. So I'm working with a little eco-friendly farm in, I'm sorry, it's not South Carolina, North Carolina. And so I buy the bales of wool from them, and then I store them until I have enough money to get them milled. And I came up with a 3-ply for my fingering, and then 4-ply for my DK worsted bulky and super bulky. Because the more plies you have, it is more expensive to create, because of course the mill is doing each of the plies and then twisting them together. So the more plies, the more expensive the process. But those plies give you all that great stitch definition, and they also help to dampen down the pilling. So my mill isn't too far away from the farm, which is also good because milling takes a lot of water. And so that was also something that I was cognizant of in terms of, transportation, water, blah, blah. So then in terms of the dyes, I wanted obviously to use all natural dyes and mostly vegetation. So I come up with the colors and the dye formulas, usually by doing a combination of like foraging and going to the grocery store, avocado pits, onions, all the classic things that you use in order to dye. And then I guess this is my hobby.
Yeah.
Playing around with different, mushrooms and walnuts and, all the stuff. Kind of, I guess it's like, and just like cooking this stuff up and seeing what happens. And so I come up with the colors, I write down the recipes, I repeat it a couple of times, and then I have to hand that over to a dye house because I don't have the bandwidth with the shop to also do. And when you're making your own yarn as opposed to buying the bases from one of the wholesalers, you're buying a bale, 2 bales, 3 bales. It's a really big, heavy upfront investment, which is why most people don't do it. But I really wanted to. So I have my
Please show it off.
Purple Couch collection, which I named after a ton of the people that hang out here in our community. And you can see that it's, by the very nature of, it being hand dyed and also natural dyes, it has a lot of tonality to it, which is kind of fun. I always say each one of my hanks, they're sisters, not twins. So if you really care about consistency, then you want to kind of alternate strands. And then this is like, I called it the Pacifica Cosi collection, but otherwise known as the COVID collection. Because I launched this during COVID. I wanted to do something even more kind of rustic with a woolen spun. I'd already been in touch with the secondary mill that I wanted to use, and I had already bought the bale that this has used, but then COVID happened. I had to shut down the shop, and all the money that I had been saving in order to get my yarn spun went on paying the rent and surviving through the several months that we were closed. And then I got a little economic disaster recovery, and I was like, yay, I can get my yarn milled. So I went with a woolen spun because there aren't that many woolen spun yarns. And again, I'm trying to, not repeat anything that anybody else is doing. So I'm wearing this one. Right.
Yeah. What's the name of that colorway?
Oh, this one is Stormy Waves at Rockaway Beach. I named each one of them after like places we were kind of hanging out with locally at home in Pacifica.
I think I have a skein of it in bulky in my stash. I think that's the one I went with. It's either that. I'm pretty sure. It's so pretty. I love it. And it's so wearable.
Yeah. So, and it was an accident because I was trying to make black.
What did you use to make that color? What?
It's a variety of different. What I did not use, I will tell you, is bugs because in ground up bugs work like certain types of beetles they use for to help with black.
I've heard of this with, oh, we're gonna gross some people out here. Red velvet cake. The red in red velvet cake is crushed up red beetles.
Oh, really?
The dye that they use. So if you've ever had red velvet cake, you've had bugs.
Okay, if you wanted to use beetles to make your yarn, where would you get a bunch of ground up beetles?
So you can just buy natural dyes. I mean, you can just go out and you can buy them. You can find a source for them. I mean, I do that sometimes. Like but I try to not try. I have only done that by sourcing it locally.
Right.
When I really couldn't grind it up and make it happen for myself.
Right.
But you'll find that most of my colors are from beets, from avocados, from onions, from berries, just using sort of more common, easy items that are readily available. And then of course you have to set it, but that's a whole nother
we just blew his mind.
Yeah, can you tell that I'm like, wow. I mean, I feel like you're a museum of knowledge. I'm learning so much information, and this is exactly what I wanted to get, not only out of an interview, but also out of this podcast. I am learning so much about my sister craft, like because
sister craft. I like that
because I didn't know. Like, I also only use natural fibers. I only like using cotton. But I wouldn't say that I use like high quality cotton because I have to use so many different colors and I have to use so many I have to be very consistent with my colors.
It's not organic cotton.
It's not organic cotton, no. But obviously, like, because of that, I don't really know a lot about the yarn world, especially when it comes to dyeing, when it comes to like, I didn't know that wool was antibacterial either. Like that's crazy. I just feel like my mind has been blown about so much about this.
It's such an underutilized source of fiber. And, I, like I said, I carry superwash in the shop. I wish nobody wanted it, but people do. And I am in business and it's a compromise that I make. But,
really quick, can you, what does that mean? Because I don't really know what that means.
Right. So superwash basically means that it's got a chemical coating that has been put on the yarn in order to ensure that it doesn't felt.
Oh,
so
okay.
that means you can throw it in the wash.
Got it.
Doesn't necessarily mean you can throw it in the dryer, but you can certainly throw it in a delicate wash. And a lot of people like to use it, and a lot of dyers buy superwash because it's easier to dye with. I mean, if you agitate, massively easier. If you agitate the non-superwash too much, then it felts. So you've ruined your hanks of yarn. So that's part of the reason why you can get so much. Well, listen, I'm sure there are plenty of natural dyers who can do a much, much better job than I can. But I think that superwash is easier to work with in terms of like creating speckles and controlling your yarn. But that's my point of view, and maybe it's not correct. What is interesting though is how toxic acrylic is. That it's not allowed to be manufactured on American or European soil. So that's the only one that I would say, needs to kind of be avoided at all cost. Acrylic, yeah. It's basically taking plastic and petrochemicals and
That's what every time someone comes into my live streams and they ask, like, what kind of yarn should I use? The first thing I say is just don't use acrylic. Whatever you do, just don't use acrylic, because it not only does it make your stitches not look good, like it's just not great looking.
I also find it's not user friendly for beginners as much as people like to think it is. It doesn't have the natural stretch that wool does. So if you're learning how to knit for the first time and you're holding your needles way too far apart, you're going to be struggling with plastic, of course.
Yeah.
So I never recommend acrylic.
Yeah, acrylic's just a not. Yeah. And just the whole natural fiber thing. I think just using a natural fiber, it makes me feel better. It looks better. Like it's not that much more expensive, in all honesty, especially when it comes to like the cotton that I use. People are always like, oh, but it's too expensive. I'm like, man, it's like $1, $2 for like a ball of yarn. You need it's not that much more expensive, and the quality is way worth it. Way worth it. Yeah.
I know we were just talking about how a lot of goals didn't happen in 2020 because of things that were out of our control. But now that it seems like you are more prepared than ever, quarantining for as long as we need to stay safe, what are your 2021 goals?
Well, the first thing that pops into my head is to like be vaccinated. Like that's a really big, like I want to be vaccinated. Like I can't wait. Like that's a big goal. I'm not exactly in control of it, but I can't wait for it to happen.
That's achievable though. I believe that's achievable.
I have started redoing our back room because my goal is by the end of 2021, we're going to have our community again. And so I'm actually making a bigger space. So I'm redecorating that so that I'm calling it my room of hope, because it gives me, just hope that we're going to gather in a bigger way. So that's a goal. I need to do a better job with social media. So I might be bugging you guys because you guys are great at it and I'm so at it. So I'm going to bug you. I've been so concentrated on opening up the shop, gathering my yarn sources, launching my my yarn line, and so a big goal for 2021 is to be better and more prolific at my social media.
Yeah.
And I have more fibers that I want to launch.
Oh, I do it.
Yeah.
That's why earlier I was like 2, 3, any future ones? Oh, I'm so excited. I have an add-on to that question. We're going to ask you what your favorite project was of 2020. Is it the Wave of Change cardigan you're wearing?
Yeah, and I loved making this as well, which is why I brought it, because it's so beautiful. It's such a quick, and yet detailed 2-skein worsted weight project. It's so beautiful, and it's the perfect thing for like you want to go on a beach walk and throw something on. I just think it's really.
Oh, thank you. I was going to ask, do you have any plans for your projects in 2021? What do you absolutely want to make in 2021?
Well, there's a Wave of Change pullover now, which honestly, I don't have the same time that I used to have at knitting. And so anything on size 10 needles, I'm done. Like it's yes, please. And as it was, I was always like scarf, pashmina, shawl, hat, gloves. And so Afifa keeps teasing me that I better start making some of her stuff. She made the cutest, oh my gosh, she made the cutest vest using my yarn, which yeah. I'm definitely going to make that. It's absolutely adorable. And I also just kind of want to, and Life is Cozy. She has, I think that's going to be the next thing that I cast on. It's actually one of her free patterns. And it's just a really simple kind of like long cardigan that you could throw over like everything, leggings, etc. You have a beautiful sweater that I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's quite lightweight at the top.
Oh, the Sun and Fog pattern. Yeah, the Summertide.
Summer Tide. That's it. Yeah, Summer Tide. I actually did kits for the Summer Tide, which I sold out. I just think that would be like that'd be a good thing to cast on after I do that cardigan because it's perfect for spring. So yeah, I love the Summer Tide. So those are the things that I'm looking forward to, and just kind of discovering some new designers.
That's one of my goals in 2021 is to, as much as I love my little bubble, I need to branch out of my little bubble sometimes. And I think a great way is just looking for those new designers, like you said, especially designers that don't look like me and don't grow up where I grew up, and so I can learn a thing or two.
Yeah.
And also continuing to collaborate with people that I love, like Kelly.
We're lucky we've got this like whole fiber group going on in the Bay Area, and I just feel really, really happy. We've got good people.
Kelly, is there anything that you would like to plug? Website, social media, whatever you want.
Anything.
I feel like I was already like massively plugging my yarn and my shop. My website is www.theroyalbeeyarncompany, all spelled out. I didn't think about that ahead of time in terms of length of URL.com. And then I've participated in the 2021 Sun and Fog collection, which is a collaboration including Jules of designers like Jules, including Jules, and yarn makers such as myself, as well as other yarn shops. And my yarn, my bulky weight yarn, my woolen spun bulky weight yarn was used by No Panic Knitting, Pamela. And she, oh my gosh, talk about lovely person. And she made this beautiful cowl, which she named after her mother-in-law, who, just as a tribute to her mother-in-law, who was super, super fond of the ocean. So it was just, and she describes it as like a warm hug while you're walking on the beach, which I thought was really delightful. She's a really delightful person. So
She's the sweetest.
yeah, she is the sweetest, isn't she? Yeah, she really is. Yeah. So that's my plug.
Awesome.
And they can find your Instagram and stuff.
Oh yeah, it's the Royal Bee Yarn Company.
Yeah.
Everything all spelled out, really long. Bee is BEE, like buzzing bees.
Yeah, and like she just said, all the show notes, if you're watching this right now and you would like to check out more of Kelly's stuff, check out the show notes. We'll have links to everything down there.
Everything.
Her band and everything.
The shop is open, following CDC guidelines. We're closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, but open all the other days of the week, 11 to 6.
And you have an online shop too?
Oh yeah. My online shop, I have kits, but I'm just really concentrated on my own yarn.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly. This was a wonderful first interview. You are just the most wonderful person. Thank you so much for talking with us.
I cannot wait until COVID's over and we can all hang out.
I know.
Yeah, 100% agree. And yeah, thank you so much for opening my eyes to a world that I didn't know my eyes were closed to.
And there's more to learn.
Oh,
you just
yeah.
scratch the surface.
Yeah, which I'm very excited about future interviews with whoever we find to tell us more, inform me more.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks very much. And yeah, we'll talk to you later.